Welcome to Real Life Women, for women, by women. Our mission is to impact and enrich lives by discussing anything that relates to our happiness, our health, and our wealth. Please take a moment to share, like, and subscribe to our channel so that we can spread the message of hope and perseverance and enrich lives together. Thanks for listening. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Dr. Kristin Kidgell. I'm coming to you from St. Petersburg, Florida. And today we are interviewing a friend of mine. I'm so lucky to call her a friend, who happened to have recently wrote a book. And I want to talk about this book. And so while she was writing it, I kept bugging her. I'm like, when do we record? When can we record? When can we interview? When? She's like, just wait. So here we are. I waited. How long did I wait? How long did it take you to write this book?
I think you waited about a year.
I waited about a year. That sounds about right.
About a year, but it took me a little bit long, a bit longer than that.
So let me again. Her name is Xochitl Rodriguez with a beautiful middle name that I practiced before we hit record. Can you please pronounce your middle name? It is beautiful. It really is.
Mireya.
Oh, see, now you can see why I had you pronounce it. Okay, so her book is called A Proverb 31 Woman, correct?
Proverbs 31 Woman.
Proverbs 31 Woman. Kingdom life strategies for the 21st century woman.
Correct.
Awesome. So this is actually written in the most interesting fashion that I didn't expect, because I expected biblical stuff. I expected your background, which we'll get into, and then why you wrote it and all that stuff. But you created homework in it. You created some journaling in it. You created deep thought pattern questions that get women thinking a lot, not just like taking each of the verses. By the way, it is Proverbs 31, but it's 10 through 31. So just to be clear, which you do have, in one of the chapters, you have it all written out. I can't remember which Bible you used, but you did state which one it was. Yeah. And then you basically break it all down and you go through each verse, which I loved. So you gave like a personal experience, and then you gave more of a 21st century meaning, so to speak. And then along the way, we're journaling and answering questions. So just so people know that it's written really well, and it's an easy read. I really, really enjoyed it, to be honest with you. Okay. Yeah. But you hit on some really interesting topics that I think are controversial. And I know that you know that you did that. So we'll get on those later, but let's start with why. Like, what, I know your heart led you, something was on your heart, likely that was like, oh, I'm gonna write this book, but it took place at an interesting time in life. So why don't you kind of go back there?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for the interview. It's always great to speak with you.
My pleasure.
And yeah, it's a pleasure to talk about the book because first of all, I don't feel qualified to write about the Bible because I've never enjoyed reading it. And that is part of the story with this particular book, is that with me, is that I grew up Catholic, and what I remember the priests talking about never had women in a beautiful light. They were usually like prostitutes, seductresses, whores. It was just the worst that I as a child, that I was like, wow, there's like these women were really, and Eve, right? So Eve was the first. And then on the good side, there was the Virgin Mary. And it was like, she was like so holy and so in her own category that like I never related to any of them, because it was like, well, why is this? And why did God create women if they were all just going to be seducing men and ruining everything? And so I just kind of grew up like that, but I always felt God's love. Like I always loved God, and I felt that God loved me. And so I was always confused about it. And then as I got much older, I went through a really bad divorce where he like took everything from, like, I was ready to jump in front of the train. I was so tired of the fight. I was so defeated. I was so broken. And I kept asking God, is like, why did you let this happen to me? Why did you let this happen to me? You know, it's like, I always felt like I'm not that bad. Why am I getting punished like this? How could you let this happen to me? What do you want from me? What am I doing wrong? And it was always these questions. And I always felt the love from God. And after being at that rock bottom, I had an opportunity to go open, not to open, to buy businesses in Northern California. And I live in Southern California and had businesses in Southern California with my brother. And when that opportunity came up, it was like, I knew that was a God gifted opportunity, because there's no way that could have happened. And then how I was able to purchase them was a whole nother story.
Mm-hmm.
But in all of that, I always still had like, why did God let all that happen to me? And I've sought spirituality in many different forms, many different faiths, trying to find, where is all this happening? I was also tormented by demons a lot, like on a regular basis, and which is a whole nother story. And then life kept happening, some more stuff happened, and it's like, oh, why are you letting all this happen? So I say all of that because that was my background. And so, and I never wanted to read the Bible ever. But I was seeking God. And then I finally, this was actually during the pandemic, we were all in lockdown, and I came across an article that talked about, I don't remember the name of the article, but I did write about it in the book. But anyway, so I read an article that led me to ordering this man's book, that then led to me reading Proverbs 31. And it talks about the woman, and I think it's a woman in the diamond in the household of faith, or something like that. And anyway, I the first time that I read Proverbs 31, I was crying. I was crying. I was like, oh my God, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever read. And I just kind of felt in my heart that this is who God created all women to be. And for the first time, I felt the love just completely surround me, completely humble me. It's what I think is the fear of the Lord in a very positive way, not in a fearful way, but just this humbling of love that I had never experienced, let alone from words. And so I was crying, and it's like, my goodness, it's like, you love me. It was first about me, right? It was like, you love me. You love me a lot. This is who you created me to be. And then it was a revelation, like, you and all women, so that we can have pretty much anything and everything and be it all. And then I was like, well, why did you let me go through all of that? And I realized all the writing was on the wall. I should have never married that man. It wasn't God. God gave me more than enough signals. I think I counted them. There were like 5 of them. He gave me all the signs to not marry him. And I was so blinded that I went ahead and did it, and then blamed God for it. And so when I read Proverbs, it was like, I've been blaming you, and you have nothing but love for me. And that was part of my breakdown. That was part of my eating crow, coming to Jesus meeting, whatever we want to call it. It's like, that was the moment that I'm like, oh my goodness, it's like, God loves women and created us for greatness. So why did I not see what he had in front of me? And then I started to ask more questions, and I started to research this Proverbs. Is like, okay, who does she really exist? Is like, how does this happen? And come to find out that a lot of what I found was negative. Meaning, you cannot have it all. Don't try to be like her. She was a fictitious woman. She's made believe. Don't try to measure yourself up to her. You're only gonna fall short. And I started to read all these negative comments about how she's so far away, no one can attain this woman, no one can be her. And in my heart, I'm like, no, you got this all wrong. This is who we were created to be. The question is, how do we do this? And so that's what led on this mission of writing the book. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to write a book about it. What happened was, after me going through all of that and then researching and finding all this, finding that women are being shortchanged and setting a very low expectation, that I'm like, no, this is wrong. And so with the book, it's my attempt of explaining what these verses are and how they do relate. This isn't about a woman that existed years back, centuries back. This is about who we are today and who we are created to be. And yes, with God's love and the standard that he has, we can achieve that standard. We can have it. And then I realized it was the demons that were creating all the chaos, not God. And that was the thing that just blew me away, that it's like, here I'm blaming God, and the whole time he's the one that's been holding my hand through all of this, so I didn't jump in front of the train. And I've been blaming the one person the one God that has been by my side the whole time, when in reality it was the demons that were creating all this chaos in my life. And that's
well, I'm recalling a particular part where you wrote that you remember God saying to you, it's because you didn't love yourself enough. Was that about that same time?
No, that
Okay.
that was with a relationship that I had, fairly recent, but it was a 12-year relationship.
Oh, okay.
It was a 12-year relationship where I had asked God, is like, why did you let this happen? And why was I in this relationship if he didn't want to get married? And then he proposed, and of course I was really happy about it. And then I realized he wasn't going to marry me. And so I took him off the hook. I'm like, hey, you don't have to do this. Kristin, I don't remember. I remember writing that part in the book, and now I'm a little confused.
I'm trying to recall exactly what I feel like it was. You were still kind of asking why, why did I fall in love with him, and why, and it was something, why did it all happen? And and that you loved him so deeply. You loved him to change. I think it was about the helping people change, or hoping they would change, or I loved him so much. Why?
Yeah,
and it was kind of like you had that, you said that I heard God say, it's because you didn't love yourself enough. It's like, why did he leave? It was in that text when you were talking about.
Yeah, I think it might have been with that boyfriend. I don't have to reread the book.
You were very raw with everything. You talked about as a teen how you were starting to become angry. You wrote a report.
Yeah.
And you were proud of this report on how, it was how you were, what was the words you were using about all the women that were, I don't know, you didn't use evil, but they were just all these bad women and adulterous and all these different things, but you were kind of on that boat for a while. And I think, was there anger around your father being sick for so long and then not making it?
Not anger, but a lot of sadness. Like, why was my dad sick for 18 years? He was going to dialysis three times a week. And my dad was one that wanted to live. Like, he always did enjoy his life. But once he became sick, he had to stop working, and he became very weak. and he was on dialysis. Like I said, he was on dialysis 3 times a week. And it was very difficult because even while he was on dialysis, he started to go to school my dad had always studied, because he actually, when he was working, he was studying to be like certified in machinery. And that, so he was in school. So once he had gotten a job, and that's what he was doing. Machine shop is what he was doing. And then he went to school to learn more about how they make the gears and the calculations. And I remember, like, I was in high school, and I was taking trigonometry, and he was learning trigonometry. And so we kind of got to like, oh, you use that in making gears. And remember those conversations. But yeah, here's a man that loved life and was stuck to a machine for 4 hours 3 times a week. And my mother never complained about taking him to dialysis and picking him up, because he wasn't well enough to drive himself there and get back. Sad. So it was it was very unfair, I thought. And then after 18 years, he gets a kidney, and he had 4 good years before he passed away. And that also made me like, just really sad. Like, here's a man that wanted to live and didn't get to. He couldn't travel because every other day he had to be in dialysis. He couldn't do so much. He was so limited, and he slept a lot.
Had you already been really attached to the Proverbs 31 when you were going through that? Okay, so it was before that.
No, this Proverbs 31 came about 2.5 years ago. This is very, very new in my life. And I almost didn't put out the book because who am I to write about the Proverbs 31 woman? I didn't grow up in a church. I wasn't going to church. I did, even now I don't go to what most people call church. And I've got a walk-in closet full of skeletons that I did not want to. Closet. A walk-in closet.
I have never heard anybody call it a walk-in closet.
Oh,
gosh,
yeah.
Everybody probably has an entire room.
Right. Yeah. And so I was concerned about what are people going to say? I didn't want my past to come back and haunt me. I was like, and it wasn't so much about writing a book, because it was a lot about my own process and my healing. And so it wasn't like, I got to get this book out. And I wrote it, and then it sat for a long time because of that. It's like, I don't think I want to put myself out there. And plus, to me, it was already an accomplishment that I found God, and I found how much he loves women through this one verse, that I was happy. I was happy. But then it was like, that's very selfish of me, because if I was in that situation, I would imagine that there are many other women. And even if they didn't have anything similar to my past, I still think that women are living below the standard that God has placed for them. And not only a standard, but something that is achievable.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And that's why you wrote it, and how you broke each chapter up and each verse up into its own little chapters and things like that. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. So am I wrong? I'm going to mispronounce the woman's name in the Bible, and you're going to fix it, because you said it's kind of used in 2 different ways.
Yes.
At this point, you have it written as Queen Bathsheba.
Correct.
Or Bathsheba.
Correct.
I got it right.
You got it.
So,
yeah.
But she wasn't. Is she quoted in the Bible as the person who wrote those verses out?
So she's not exactly quoted in the Bible as writing Proverbs 31. Okay. What happened is that she was the one that told her son, Solomon.
Got it. So let's go back. Yep. So let's go back to how she became queen and how that all unfolded. And you basically started the book around her background.
Yes.
Okay.
And that was for a couple of reasons. One is I'd always heard the story about the woman that was bathing to seduce a queen. That was the story I had heard. Even though I never read the Bible, the story had it that she was bathing to seduce the king. And then, the king sees her, she goes off with him, and she gets pregnant, and they have a baby that dies, and then they have another baby that turns out to be King Solomon. That was the story that I'd heard, right? So once I read Proverbs 31 and realized just how much God loved women, and then started to study some of the other women in the Bible, I was like, she really, really got to me, because what had happened was she was bathing. That is true. And he stepped out of his bed to go out. And the way it was structured then is like the king's quarters were much higher than everybody else, because they're not going to make
over the city or over the town, right?
So it would be logical that he's walking outside and he sees her, spots her bathing, and there were no bathtubs the way we see them, showers covered. Many times they bathed from the rainwaters, and so she's minding her business, bathing. And back then, women would bathe after their cycles, because that's when they would cleanse themselves.
And at night.
And yes, more than likely it was at night. And I've read different Bible versions to try to get more of a consensus.
Okay.
But yeah, it seems like it was late evening, under the moonlight type of thing. And so he calls for her. He wants to know about her. They tell her she's married to Uriah, who's one of your leaders, your sergeants in the army. And he calls for her anyway, knowing she's married. So now she has to go to the king. Like, you don't get to say no to a king. And so we don't know how willing she went. We don't know if she enjoyed the process. We don't know if she resisted. We don't know a lot of things. What we know is that the king called for her. She had to go. She was married, and she had already had her cycle. So she's off to the king. Next thing you know, she's pregnant, and her husband's out to war. So as I'm reading this, I'm like, oh my God, this is so much drama. It's like, this woman is now pregnant. Her husband is out to war, and she's carrying the king's baby. And her father was still alive from what I've read. Her father, grandfather, who all were part of the army as well. They're all alive. It's like, what does this woman do? Like, and I try to think, if I was in her shoes, what would I have done? Do I try to communicate with my husband and tell him I'm having the king's baby? Do I tell my dad, who's worked for the king before, I'm pregnant and it's the king's?
Well, she went to the king.
So she went to the king, right? And this is something that also fascinated me, that the king himself said, nowhere does it say that he denied that was his child. So it's like so to me, she had to have been a reputable woman, that he believed her. And so anyway, so what happens is he tries to get the husband to sleep with the wife. It doesn't work. He tries multiple things. King David has him killed to get him out of the picture. And then he marries Bathsheba, who then becomes queen. So that's how she became queen. Their first baby dies. And, so I'm like, oh my God, it's like this woman lost her husband. She just lost a baby. And she's still with this man that might have taken her by force, might have raped her. So with all of that, I'm thinking, man, it's like, that'd be more than enough reasons to be bitter the rest of your life. And she's not. She winds up having another baby, which turns out to be King Solomon, who becomes king. And what I love about her is that she took whatever she was feeling, whatever she was going through, and she poured the best into her son, and used what her husband did to show her son, this is what you're to do. This is how you're to behave.
And that's
This is
Proverbs
what you look
31.
for. Yes, this is
Yes.
what you look for in a woman.
Love
Yes.
it.
Yeah, I just loved her, that it's like, wow, it's like she could have been angry and bitter and hated everybody. And instead, she used what she went through to teach her son what to do.
And it made it into the Bible.
Yes. Yeah, because the book of Proverbs, it said that King Solomon wrote the book of Proverbs.
Okay, there you go. The virtuous woman. So when you were breaking down each verse, again, which is 10 through 31, it seems like some of them were kind of, maybe a little easy, but I liked how you would prompt people, not just with the questions, right? But you were prompting people just to think like, well, compare how today's woman thinks, compare how what's on TV today, compare. You even had that story, which I can totally relate to, which is where you glance over and you're on an airplane and somebody's watching stuff that should not be seen. Like, yeah, like, and you don't remember if it was the airplane thing or if it was an iPad somebody was watching, but still, like, where's the couth and the respect of the people around you? There might be, who cares if it's small children? Maybe it's an elderly woman that, who knows, right? But
Yeah.
you do hit on purity, you do hit on submission, you do hit on family issues, and all are trying, sometimes very trying moments to take biblically and translate it into today. How was it? How did you feel? What did you go through trying to, do those chapters, write those chapters out?
In the first draft, it was easy.
Oh.
Because it's just my thoughts, right? So it was easy. Like, and when I saw that, it made me angry because it's like, I wouldn't want my niece sitting here, as a 7-year-old having, and just a curiosity, they'd be looking, so it's like that person's choice of movie is violating this child's innocence. And he's taking that away from this child, because if a little girl, and that's what came to mind, if a little girl's watching this and she sees another woman being tied up, and whether she's enjoying it or not, I couldn't tell. I don't know what the movie was about. I don't know the movie, but I don't want that. And I think that if a family wants to show their children that, I don't like it, but that's their prerogative. But when you're in a public situation, you are now responsible for the people around you. And I think as a community, we've been very relaxed with that. And so it became, I was going to write it anyway. And I know that I'll probably get backlash for it. That's fine. If I could get people to think about being responsible for others, then that's fine. If I get hate mail, I get hate mail. If nobody reads a book, nobody reads a book. It was in my heart to write it. And so I've fulfilled what I think is my, I don't want to say responsibility, but my teaching, what I learned from it, that I'm putting it out there for that. Like the chapter in Sex and the City.
Yep.
I specifically wrote about that because some years back I was dating, and it's like, there is a certain expectation that you're just going to jump in bed with them. And it's like, I don't know you. I don't want diseases. It was, and I hadn't read the book, but it was probably quite liberal and would have done pretty much whatever. Well, I wouldn't do anything, but I could see how first dates were at one time holding hands was something, and then maybe kissing. Now it's almost like it's this expectancy, like you're going to jump into bed with them. And I want to like tell women and men is like, no, there's still a level of purity, regardless of my past. there's still a level of respect and a level of purity that I want to hold for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we should create a society where it becomes more and more expected, where it becomes more and more easier to break the rules. And that's happening in many areas, not only in sex, but and in relationships, but in so many other areas where we're not respecting authorities, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, everything evolves and changes, and that's a whole nother topic, right?
Yes.
Something that just dawned on me, two things. One, you were talking about the book was on your heart. Unless you, I think there's a book in everybody, honestly.
Yes.
I remember somebody quite a few years ago telling me they thought I would be writing a book, and I was like, I don't know who you're talking to. I ended up writing a book, and then I am almost finishing up another one.
Yeah.
But the second one for sure was placed on my heart, and I tried to push it away multiple times. So for those of you out there that have thought, literally thought, been given the thought, whether it's God, whatever you believe, it's been put on your heart to write a book, you're supposed to write that book. Because when you try not to write a book, it doesn't go away. You constantly think, oh, you should be writing that book again. Okay. So that's kind of, I think, and I thought it was interesting when you said that you wrote it and you put it away and then you're like keeping it from people. That's exactly, I think that's why there is a book in everybody. It's kind of like a fingerprint, all of our lives are so different. And I think we're all supposed to learn something from each person we meet, and they're supposed to learn something from us. So we're learning and teaching in all interactions. So if we can remember that, I think that's super helpful, which leads me to my next question. Who do you think this book is for?
I think this book is for the woman that has felt unloved. And I don't mean by a man, I just mean like by life. The woman that has been hurt, that has been disappointed, that has wondered, why am I even here? That's who this book is for, because my goal is that through the book, they first learn how much God loves them, how much he has created for them, more than what we could imagine. And so the book is for that woman, to let her know, is like, you are so loved, you are so capable, and everything that you've gone through, but there's such a huge reward for you. And with your past, you don't just bury it. You write that book and you're like, here, share it with somebody that's going through it. What took me 7 years to restabilize myself from a divorce, I have another book that I wrote that I need to rewrite so I don't get sued. But that book was written so that when women are going through what I went through, don't wait 7 years to heal, or to get well enough to keep moving forward. But that book is like, I want that time shortened by a lot for the next person.
Right. I got it.
So this particular book is written for the woman that has been hurt. And it's been interesting because I've had quite a few women tell me that they've given the book to a man.
I can see how a man that's looking for a very stable, grounded, self-assured, you know what I mean? Like, I can see how it could help men. I don't think this is written for just women. Yeah. Now, you have a niece. How old is she now?
She is 18.
Do you have a younger niece than that?
Yes, I have another one that's 12 and 6.
So and I have a soon to be 19-year-old and a early 20s, almost mid 20s now, son. So we're talking about age groups to read this, right? Because thwarting things that maybe this book could help them avoid. How young is too young to read this, do you think? Because we're talking about Sex in the City,
Mhm.
which they won't be even probably be able to relate to. But have you thought about that?
No, I've not thought about how young someone is.
Because kids these days, they're going through some stuff, especially high schoolers, young 20 somethings. I mean, obviously this is probably obviously not for elementary, probably not for middle school. They're still not mentally really developed, but maybe the mature high schooler that's feeling lost. I think you're hitting it right on the head, like who this will benefit. I think the age group is a little gray area.
Yeah, you when you mentioned like with the Sex and the City, like them, they might not know. I think children know a lot more
Yes.
than what we knew. I think the internet
uh, that's true.
does not leave anything to the imagination. Just I think a couple of days ago, I was looking, I was searching something, and there was a woman with her hands up, and like the breasts were like completely blurred out,
Mm-hmm.
and yet 4 pictures later, it's fully exposed.
Oh, on social
Yes,
media?
no, on a Google search.
Oh.
It was a Google search that I was doing, and I remember what I entered, and I said, okay, well, at least it's blurred. And then I keep going. I'm like, oh, it's not blurred. So I think children are being exposed to a lot of that. And I think if they have the patience to sit through a book and read, I think but probably middle school is, and I have thought is like, if I could write another book to
Mm,
like the Proverbs
teens.
31, yeah, teenager,
Teenager. Oh, I love it,
Proverbs
Sochi.
31 girl, the Proverbs 31 businesswoman, you know.
Wife or a man.
Mhm.
I that's awesome. That's very awesome. I could also see this, there was a time in my life where reading the Bible isn't really something you're like, go read the Bible. What I grew up doing and into my adulthood was, you have Bible study groups, you have Bible study workbooks. Whether you're in a church or not, you can get Bible study workbooks and such. And your book is similar to a workbook, even though it's written only about, one section and, out of a bunch of a
65
tiny
days.
little part, right? And
Yeah.
so and you do give advice to people that are wanting to read the Bible more and kind of your experience. And I wanted to mention that was my experience because that's a really good way to chunk it down. And if you do it in a group or do it with a friend or something like that, where you guys are meeting every week or every other week, you can talk about what you're getting out of it
Mhm.
while you're doing the workbooks together. And so that's a really good way to chunk down the Bible, I found. And so I'm trying to think, did I even go front to back in all those years? I don't think so. I think in my mind, I thought I was going to be able to, but you would have to stay on that path of studying and studying and studying.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I tried it, but it didn't work for me. And I think there's so much good in the Bible that I want to encourage people to read it.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, if they can get with the group,
Yeah.
but more so like as they're reading, to try to listen from God and not from the church, to try to
Right,
get the
right, right. Yeah.
information directly from God, um, and encourage them to keep going, because there are so many answers and so many examples. And that is what I try to do with the book and the questions, is to relate it, to get people, because my thought was like, well, I don't even know who wrote the book. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, why? And I had all these reasons for not doing it.
Right.
So once I started to read it with different eyes, and with trying to understand what God wants, because I'm not going to say like, oh yeah, this is what God is telling everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't know what he's going to tell everybody. I'm just trying to interpret what he's telling me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Intention
so
is to interpret. Yeah.
yes, And so I asked those questions to try to get that connection so people could see, is like, it might have been written a long time ago. It might have been written by this person or that person, whoever put it together. Like, regardless of how, like, I don't want to go into that part. I just want to go like, can we apply it today?
Right.
And where and how?
Right. It's perfect. Are you going to use your book and have study groups? Are you going to maybe go live on Facebook and go through a chapter? Have you thought about, I mean, I know you've thought about it, but or have you made any decision on what's next with the book?
A course is what's next with the book. In the meantime, and what I mean by a course is, my background, a lot of my background is in business. And so that's the one area that I want to teach women, like, you can have businesses, you can have multiple businesses. And I want to encourage that realm so that women don't feel stuck.
Me too.
Yes. Yeah. So that's one area that I really want to focus and dive in on. But I've also considered like going to other people that are experts in their own area and working with them to bring in those areas, like how to be a Proverbs 31 wife. I can have an idea, but I haven't walked it through. So it's like, I could write about it, but I haven't walked through that. Whereas business, I've walked through and I've got so many experience.
I love that.
So I'd rather get
idea.
people in different, who have had success in those areas, that could break it down to show us like, oh yeah, I could do that.
When you were, well, you know so many people. You just literally, I think I know a Proverbs 31 wife. So if you're looking for one, let me know.
Yeah. And when Monday nights, I do a Facebook program that's called Divinely Designed.
Oh.
So it's not specific to the book.
Okay.
But it's about 6 to 8 women, depending on who's available. We get together and we don't know what we're going to talk about. So the conversations are very genuine, but they are centered around living a kingdom, living with kingdom principles and a kingdom life.
Got it.
It's not a religious thing, but it's like living with kingdom principles and what that means.
So how can people find that? And how can people find other ways to reach out to you if they had questions? Or I know that you do coaching, and so maybe they wanted to talk to you about your coaching. I think there's multiple ways that you are able to be found, correct?
Yes. So in Proverbs31woman.me is the webpage. And in there, I have a fillable PDF that goes with the book. So that's available there.
Very
that's
smart.
Complimentary. Then I do have some additional resources on there. I also have some of the videos from Divinely Designed, which is the Facebook program on Mondays. So I've got some links in there, and I've got all my contact information, my phone number, my email.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And I'll make sure to have all of that also in the description of this email and this video.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. So is there anything in closing you would like to convey to everybody about the book and its main purpose as we close everything? And then I have one more question after this.
Okay. So regarding the book, I would encourage everybody to read it, to go through it. You mentioned it is an easy read. It was intentional. There are some Bible verses, which I would always get irritated when I would read a book and there were Bible verses, because I'm like, why do you got to keep throwing this in there? There is a reason why. But it's not a beat you up book. This is a book to give you additional tools for you to really see just how loved you really are, how capable you are, and that you can have it all. And there's nothing wrong with trying to achieve more and receiving it. So I'd encourage everybody to just enjoy it and answer the questions, to reflect on like, how did I treat my ex-mother-in-law? You know,
Yeah.
things could I have done different, and how can I love people more? So I would say that. But yeah, just now, the most profound message I think is just a realization of how much God loves us.
Awesome. So my last question is always for fun. Because we're all humans, okay? I always like to know, what is one fun fact about Xochitl Rodriguez? What is one thing that most people don't know about you that is just silly or fascinating, or just maybe even some of your relatives don't know? I don't know. These are always really good. This is hard.
It is hard because I think I don't see myself as a whole lot of fun. That's always the challenge for me.
Let's work on that wheel of life together.
Yes. Yes.
Childhood, fun fact. What there you have a weakness. Maybe it's is it the Mexican candy or is it Mexican chocolate? You have something that you really adore. Is that the right word? Maybe it's not the right word, but you have a special place in your heart for something like that. Isn't it something? Is it specifically a Mexican candy?
um, so
But your family
about,
probably knows this, by the way.
yeah, I don't know if we're talking about that I like to eat red clay, and I'm very specific about what kind of red clay I eat, but I do like to eat red Mexican clay.
Oh, the clay.
Yeah.
I thought it was a chocolate too. Was it a chocolate your mother loved?
No.
Okay. I thought I remember you telling me there's a specific Mexican chocolate that you like, but maybe it was something else.
Maybe it's the have you seen the Mexican chocolate that we use for hot chocolate?
See, this is what I think you've told me about, because I think it's not actually, I think it's for hot chocolate.
Yeah, so there are these Mexican bars of chocolate that you're supposed to put in like milk or hot water, and it'll dissolve and you make hot chocolate.
Okay.
I just have the bars by themselves. I just eat those bars like they're candy.
Uh, and are they not? Not
Well,
really. They're supposed to be used for something
you're
else.
supposed to
Got
put
it.
it in there, but I'm like, well, they taste great. So I just eat those by themselves.
Got it. See, that's a fun fact. I don't know why I remembered that, because I think we were doing a Marco Polo or something, and you're like, okay, I've had a rough day today. That's funny. Well, it was such a pleasure to finally do this interview about your book that I waited, I'm thinking 9 months to a year. I'm thinking it's about that, right? And it was wonderful. And the book's wonderful. And I can't wait to share it with other people.
Thank you,
And
Kristin.
then hopefully we can also interview you when you have your other ones done and published.
Yes, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to speak with you.
You are so welcome.